Imagine this. You're on a wooden ship in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by endless waves. No GPS, no maps, and no clue what's out there. Sounds like a nightmare, right? But for medieval sailors, this was just another Tuesday. How did they not only survive, but conquer the seas without any of the fancy gadgets we rely on today? Spoiler alert, they used the stars, some clever tricks, and a whole lot of courage. Oh, and a few methods that were downright weird. Ready to find out how they did it? Let's dive in. Picture this. It's the medieval era. Ships are made of wood, the ocean is a mystery, and the only thing scarier than a storm is the thought of getting lost forever. No smartphones, no Google Maps, not even a compass for most of them. Just the open sea, the stars above, and a whole lot of creativity. These sailors didn't just navigate, they mastered the art of survival on the water. And trust me, their methods were anything but boring. Today, we're uncovering the secrets of medieval navigation. We'll explore how sailors used the stars as their GPS, relied on natural landmarks like giant rocks and weird-shaped cliffs, and even invented tools that were the medieval version of high-tech. Some of their tricks were genius, others were, well, let's just say they were creative. And a few were so bizarre, you'll wonder how they ever made it home. Stick around because this is going to be one wild ride through history. Picture this. It's a clear, moonless night and you're a medieval sailor standing on the deck of your creaky wooden ship. The ocean is pitch black, and the only light comes from thousands of stars twinkling above. For us, stars are just pretty lights, but for you, they're your lifeline. No GPS, no maps, just the stars and your wits. How did you not get lost? Well, let's just say the stars were your version of Google Maps, minus the annoying recalculating voice. Meet Polaris, the MVP of the night sky. This star was always in the same spot directly north. No matter where you were, if you could find Polaris, you knew which way was north. It was like having a giant arrow in the sky saying, "Hey, that way!" But Polaris wasn't the only star sailors relied on. Constellations like Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, and Orion, the Hunter, acted as celestial road signs. Spotting Orion's belt meant you were on the right track. It was like having your own cosmic GPS system, guiding you through the night. Imagine trying to explain GPS to a medieval sailor. They'd probably think you were talking about magic. You mean a tiny box tells you where to go? Sure. And next you'll tell me ships can fly. But for them, the stars were their version of Google Maps without the annoying rerouting. During the day when the stars took a nap, sailors turned to another celestial body, the sun. This wasn't just a source of light and warmth, it was a crucial navigation tool. By tracking the sun's position, sailors could determine their direction. Here's how it worked. In the northern hemisphere, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. At noon, when the sun is at its highest point, it's directly south. Sailors used this knowledge to figure out which way was south, helping them stay on course. It was like having a giant clock in the sky. To make this even more precise, some sailors used a tool called a sun compass, or simply marked the shadow of a stick or mast on the deck. By observing how the shadow moved, they could estimate their direction and even the time of day. This method was especially useful on long voyages when the stars weren't visible. The sun wasn't just a guide, it was also a reminder of time. Sailors knew that if they didn't make progress during the day, they'd have to rely on the stars at night, which wasn't always easy. So the sun became their daytime partner, helping them cover as much distance as possible before darkness fell. It's amazing to think that something as simple as the sun could play such a vital role in guiding ships across vast oceans. Without it, sailors would have been lost literally during the day. But what happened when the stars were hidden by clouds? No stars, no problem. Medieval sailors had a backup plan: landmarks. And no, I'm not talking about street signs or billboards. I'm talking about giant rocks, weird-shaped cliffs, and mountains that looked like they were straight out of a fantasy novel. These natural landmarks were like the sailors' version of road signs, guiding them safely along the coast. Imagine this. You're sailing along the coast, and suddenly, you spot a massive rock formation that looks like a grumpy old man. You think, hey, that's weird. But for sailors, it's a lifesaver. They'd give it a name like Old Grumpy Face, and use it as a reference point for years. Imagine being that rock, forever known as the grumpy landmark of the Mediterranean. Talk about a legacy. When the stars weren't visible thanks to clouds, storms, or daylight, sailors turned to something closer to home: the coast. Coastal navigation was all about using natural landmarks like cliffs, islands, and unique rock formations to figure out where they were and where they needed to go. These landmarks were like giant signposts in the ocean, guiding sailors safely along their routes. Take the Rock of Gibraltar, for instance. This massive limestone cliff at the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea was one of the most famous landmarks. When sailors spotted it, they knew they were about to enter the Mediterranean. It was like the "Welcome to Florida" sign, but way cooler and a lot more dramatic. Sailors would memorize these landmarks and use them as reference points. If they saw a particularly distinctive cliff or island, they'd mark it on their mental maps and use it to navigate future voyages. Some landmarks even had nicknames like Old Grumpy Face for a rock formation that looked like a grumpy old man. Imagine being that rock, forever known as the grumpy landmark of the Mediterranean. But coastal navigation wasn't just about recognizing landmarks, it was also about understanding the coastline. Sailors would study the shape of the shore, the depth of the water, and even the color of the sand to figure out their location. It was like solving a puzzle, with every clue bringing them closer to their destination. This method was especially important for sailors traveling along familiar routes, like the coasts of Europe or the Mediterranean. But even in unfamiliar waters, coastal features could provide crucial clues. If a sailor saw a unique island or a towering cliff, they'd know they were on the right track, or at least not completely lost. Coastal navigation shows just how resourceful sailors had to be. When the stars weren't an option, they turned to the land itself for guidance, proving that sometimes the best tools are the ones right in front of you. But what if there were no landmarks nearby? That's where dead reckoning came in. Sailors would estimate their position based on their speed and direction. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than guessing. Think of it like trying to find your friend's house with just a rough idea of where it is. You might get lost a few times, but eventually you'll figure it out. And if a sailor spotted a particularly weird-shaped rock, they'd probably name it something like Old Grumpy Face and use it as a reference point for years. Imagine being that rock, forever known as the grumpy landmark of the Mediterranean. Hey, look, it's Old Grumpy Face. Turn left here. Did you know sailors also used birds to find their way? These feathered friends were like nature's little helpers for medieval sailors. If a ship was lost or unsure of its position, sailors would look for birds flying in a particular direction. Seabirds like gulls or terns often flew toward land to nest or feed, so following their flight path could lead sailors to safety. Some sailors took this a step further by carrying caged birds on board. If they were lost and suspected land was nearby, they'd release a bird. If the bird flew in a straight line, they'd follow it, knowing it was heading toward land. But if the bird circled the ship or returned, it meant there was no land nearby. It was like having a feathered GPS. This method wasn't just clever, it was life-saving. In fact, the ancient Polynesians used birds extensively to navigate the vast Pacific Ocean. They'd watch the flight patterns of birds like the frigate bird, which rarely flies far from land, to find islands. Birds weren't just tools for navigation, they were also a source of hope. Seeing a bird in the middle of the ocean was a sign that land wasn't far away, giving sailors the motivation to keep going. It's amazing how something as simple as a bird could play such a crucial role in the survival of an entire crew. As voyages got longer and more complex, sailors needed more than just stars and landmarks. They couldn't just rely on luck and a prayer to get them across the ocean. So what did they do? They got creative and invented some of the earliest navigation tools. And let me tell you, these tools were the medieval version of high-tech gadgets, minus the touchscreens and apps. Picture this. A sailor is holding a strange circular device covered in intricate designs. It looks like a piece of art, but it's actually an astrolabe, a tool that helped sailors measure the angle of the stars. Think of it as the medieval version of a smartphone, except it couldn't take selfies or play Candy Crush. But it did something way more important. It helped sailors avoid getting lost at sea. And trust me, that's a feature we'd all appreciate. The astrolabe was one of the most important tools in a sailor's toolkit. It worked by measuring the angle of the stars above the horizon, which helped sailors figure out their latitude, basically, how far north or south they were. It was like having a cosmic ruler in your pocket. Sure, it took some skill to use, but it was a game changer for navigation. Then came the magnetic compass, and boy, did it revolutionize navigation. Unlike the stars, the compass worked day or night, rain or shine. It always pointed north, giving sailors a reliable way to find their direction. It was like having a tiny, magical arrow that never lied. And the best part? It didn't need Wi-Fi or batteries. The astrolabe was like the medieval version of a smartphone, except it couldn't take selfies or play Candy Crush. But it did help sailors avoid getting lost, which is way more important. And the compass? It was like having a tiny magical arrow that never lied. Move over, Siri medieval sailors had their own navigation assistant. Believe it or not, sound was also a crucial tool for sailors. When the stars were hidden by clouds, landmarks were obscured by fog, or storms made it impossible to see, sailors had to rely on their ears. In foggy or stormy weather, they'd listen carefully for clues from nature to figure out where they were. For example, the sound of waves crashing against cliffs or rocky shores could tell them they were nearing land, even if they couldn't see it. The louder the crashing, the closer they were. Sailors also paid attention to the calls of seabirds. If they heard gulls or other coastal birds, they knew land wasn't far away. It was like nature's version of sonar, using sound to see what they couldn't with their eyes. Some sailors even used bells or horns to navigate. In dense fog, ships would ring bells or blow horns to signal their location to other vessels and avoid collisions. It was a primitive but effective way to stay safe in dangerous conditions. This reliance on sound shows just how resourceful sailors had to be. When technology failed them, they turned to the natural world for guidance. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest tools like listening carefully can be the most powerful. But even with all these tools, stars, landmarks, and fancy gadgets, navigation was far from easy. Medieval sailors faced challenges that would make even the bravest of us sweat. Storms, miscalculations, and the constant threat of pirates turned every voyage into a high-stakes adventure. And trust me, there were no do-overs. One wrong move and you could end up in a completely different country or worse. Imagine this. You're in the middle of the ocean, waves crashing against your ship, the sky pitch black, and the stars completely hidden by storm clouds. Your compass is spinning wildly and you have no idea which way is north. The fear of getting lost or running out of supplies is constant. And just when you think it can't get worse, you spot another ship on the horizon. Is it a friend? Or a pirate ready to raid your cargo? This was the reality for medieval sailors. Every voyage was a gamble with life and death. The weather was one of the biggest challenges sailors faced. A sudden storm could throw off their navigation, hide the stars, and even damage their ships. Imagine trying to use a compass in the middle of a thunderstorm. It's like trying to read a map in a hurricane. Not fun. Even the best sailors made mistakes. Navigation wasn't an exact science, and a small miscalculation could lead to huge consequences. Imagine planning a trip to Italy and accidentally landing in Iceland. Oops, wrong turn. But for sailors, a wrong turn wasn't just embarrassing, it could be deadly. A miscalculation in their position could mean running out of food and fresh water, getting stuck in dangerous waters, or even hitting a reef and sinking the ship. Without modern tools like GPS, sailors had to rely on their skills, the stars, and a bit of luck. And sometimes luck just wasn't on their side. For example, in 1503, Christopher Columbus's fleet was caught in a storm, and his calculations were off by hundreds of miles. He ended up stranded in Jamaica for over a year. That's like planning a weekend getaway and accidentally spending a year in the wrong country. And let's not forget the pirates. These guys weren't just after treasure, they were after everything. If a ship got lost and wandered into pirate-infested waters, it was game over. Pirates would raid the ship, take the cargo, and sometimes even kidnap the crew. Sorry, mate, but your ship and your lunch are now ours. Human error was a constant threat, and it reminds us just how brave these sailors were. Every voyage was a gamble, and one wrong move could mean disaster. But despite the risks, they kept sailing, exploring, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Navigation wasn't just about finding the way, it was also about survival. One of the biggest threats sailors faced wasn't storms or pirates. It was a disease called scurvy. Caused by a lack of vitamin C, scurvy was the nightmare of every sailor on long voyages. Without fresh fruits and vegetables, their bodies would start to break down. Symptoms included bleeding gums, loose teeth, fatigue, and even death. Imagine trying to navigate a ship when you're too weak to stand. The longer a voyage took, the worse scurvy became. If sailors didn't reach land in time, entire crews could be wiped out. This made accurate navigation a matter of life and death. A wrong turn could mean running out of food and fresh water, leading to scurvy and disaster. Interestingly, some sailors believed that the smell of oranges or lemons could guide them to land. They thought the scent would carry over the ocean, leading them to safety. Spoiler, it didn't work, but it's a funny thought. What did work, though, was eventually discovering that citrus fruits could prevent scurvy. By the 18th century, ships started carrying lemons and limes, earning British sailors the nickname limeys. So, while medieval sailors didn't have this knowledge, scurvy was a constant reminder that navigation wasn't just about maps and stars. It was about keeping the crew alive long enough to reach their destination. Medieval sailors may not have had GPS, satellites, or even a reliable map, but their ingenuity and bravery were off the charts. They used the stars as their guide, landmarks as their road signs, and tools like the astrolabe and compass to conquer the seas. These early methods weren't just about survival, they laid the foundation for the maritime world we know today. So, the next time you use Google Maps to find your way, remember, it all started with a sailor staring at the stars and saying, "I think we go that way." If you found this journey through history fascinating, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments, what's the most surprising thing you learned about medieval navigation? Was it the star compass, the grumpy rock landmarks, or the fact that sailors basically invented beef jerky? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Next time, we'll explore how these early navigation techniques evolved into the advanced systems we use today. From the astrolabe to satellites, we'll see how humanity went from, "I think we go that way," to "turn left in 500 feet. Until then, stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, every great journey starts with a single step, or in this case, a single star.